My name's Debra Lieberman. I teach at UC Santa Barbara, and we've just started a new center called the Center for Digital Games Research. I'm a social scientist. My training, my PhD is in communication research, and I draw on the fields of psychology, education, human factors. And I'm so delighted to be here because you folks have talents and backgrounds and skills that we lack at UC Santa Barbara, or at least we haven't coalesced yet into our center. And I really see potential for us to work across campuses in really exciting ways. What brought me to be a director of a center at UC Santa Barbara? Well, for the past 40 years, my research has focused on the design of media for learning and for behavior change. My training 40 years ago was with the Sesame Street researchers and producers. And that model of having someone who understands the end user, what motivates people to learn, what motivates them to change their behavior, that has driven me throughout my career. So in the 70s, it was all children's television stuff. In the 80s, it was children's software like Reader Rabbit, my very first software, and Jumpstart, first grade, and so forth. And then in the early 90s, I was hired by a company in Silicon Valley to be the VP of Research for development of console games for health. And I jumped at it. I've been an academic. I taught at Indiana University, but this was the most academic and exciting and applied job that I could find. So they said, we want you to make console games work for health behavior change for kids. So we developed games for diabetes self-management, asthma self-management, smoking prevention for pre-adolescents who are anti-smoking until they hit junior high, and then they all start smoking. So how do you catch them how do you enhance their sense of, the sense that smoking is bad for you? And we've worked in lots of disease areas and lots of prevention areas, and working also with doctors on diagnosis and treatment, and simulations of unusual medical situations where, let's say, a hospital has to deal with an epidemic or a natural disaster, and how do they allocate their resources. So I do a lot of research in the social sciences field. I'm interested in motivation, engagement, process of learning, skill development, and behavior change. And I've become, with the grants that I've had, almost like an evangelist for the idea that there's a strong scientific basis for how we can design games for good. And, and that these games for good should have this evidence-based foundation. There are so many serious games being made today by well-meaning people who don't even know what we already know about players and social interaction around games, emotional responses to games. So I'm often talking to the lay audience about what our field is all about. In 2007, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation started a national program, and they asked me to direct it, and we named it Health Games Research. We got $8.25 million to build the field, and with the evidence base, like how do we get the medical field, the games field, the academic field to see that there's a there with games. And so we had $8.25 million. We gave $4 million away to 21 projects around the country to study health games. Some of them were exer games, some of them were games for autism. We have games for a very interesting smoking cessation game, which is mobile phone based, which uses the microphone and your breath as the interface. And you're simulating the breath gratification you get as a smoker. As you puff either very gently or in a very staccato way. And they actually did brain scans and found that playing this game reduced cravings to smoke. So I just love thinking about games as interventions in very different ways, right? We have robot games, alternate reality games, and so I provided technical assistance to these 21 projects and kind of herded them together and promoted the findings to say, look, everybody, see, we're contributing to the research base. This stuff is really important. And now I'm in the process of writing principles of health game design. So what can we extract from this research that can help the field? Another pet project of mine is, I'm calling it Body Game Builder. A lot of health games take place in the human body. And it's just perfect. You know, your mission is to save somebody's life, and there's that dramatic aspect to it, but you're also enacting health behaviors and, you know, learning about health by solving problems with health. And I get calls all the time from doctors who, in their subject matter expertise, say, I have a great idea for a game in my area. I'm so excited about this. How do I get started? I don't know the first thing about how to make a game. So I thought that's one thing we could do with our money in health games research is make a space online for novice gamers who want to make health games, and let's make it so that they can share art assets, really open, not open source, open content, share code, modify each other's games, or just, you know, if you have an image of a healthy heart, hey, take it and use it. In your game you want to show different disease states of the heart, but at least we've got the artwork started. So I'm seeking funding to make this happen. What I've done is I've made a few nutrition games to sort of seed it. And so these games will be part of the Body Game Builder community, and you can take them and do whatever you want with them. But we want to have more, and we're going to have web materials to help novice game makers. So if any of you are interested in this, I'd love to talk further about it. I'm also doing work with the Alzheimer's Association and Intel, helping baby boomers who are starting to get a little scared about their brain acuity. And there's a growing body of research to show that healthy lifestyle behaviors really help delay the onset of Alzheimer's and at least keep you mentally sharp and focused for longer. So we're doing an experiment online with a social network for cognitive health, is what we're calling it. And I've done studies also. I'm very interested in nurturing in a health game. So you're taking care of some patient. What happens to you psychologically as the player? And one thing we're finding is that it enhances your empathy for the player, you're caring, but it also makes you think, oh my gosh, this could happen to me. So I have a few studies now, and I want to build on them, to show that nurturing, almost like a digital pet. Remember, you know, the Tamagotchis, where how much you cared about keeping your digital pet alive. Well, that is a real motivator in a health game as well, but it also makes you reflect and say, this could happen to me. And so we're finding people more interested in prevention for themselves when they see characters who have chronic conditions that have a preventable aspect to them. So my university, after health games research was done, my university said, why don't you start a center and you know, bring together our faculty? Because we're a very multidisciplinary oriented campus. So we've been in business for a year now. And well, anyway, this is the Health Games Research website. I wanted to point out one thing before I turn to our news center. So, oh, I'll have to show you this in my other one. But this we have like an evergreen site now for Health Games Research, and this was a you can go to it, healthgamesresearch.org, and it has a lot of resources. But this was it's now kind of an evergreen static site with just content that we think is going to last. And now we have a website for the Center for Digital Games Research. ucsb.edu. And you know, this one is now representing our university and what we have to offer to the games field. And we are spanning everything from design to technology, and we wanted to emphasize health, learning, and entertainment. Because another strong aspect of my field is looking at personal and societal effects of video games. So you know, not only designing good games, but you know, how do commercial games affect us? So anyway, you can what we're highlighting is our faculty affiliates, and we have some brilliant professors working in all kinds of fields. We have the Allosphere at UCSB, which is a 3-story high display area. We have Virtual Environments Lab. We have medical devices, and the Ed School is doing educational technology. So on the one hand, we have a lot of expertise that I want you all to know about, and on the other hand, I'm saying we're a new center We would love to learn from your experiences and love to collaborate with you. And I don't know if there are any other social scientists in the room, but if you have a project where you might want the communication aspect or the psychological underpinnings, the motivational aspects of games, we'd love to work with you. So thanks.
And yes, we
Any
do
questions?
have social scientists in the room.
Any others?
Questions?
Yes.
I've also been struck at how many body games there are that replicate the sort of Fantastic Voyage narrative.
Yes.
And as you say, there's enough people out there wanting to do it that you could have a body game builder game. So I'm wondering, have you looked into the effects of the generic form of this kind of game, like the ideologies or the politics? They're often highly militarized versions of wars on cancer inside the body and so forth, in terms of how they affect players or designers' desires. It's such a strong genre.
It is a very strong genre, and I think that's a very important point. Only in discussions. It's not an area that we've studied. And it was interesting. There was a game for cancer called Remission, where you go inside the body and you're shooting chemo at marauding cells, and they work very closely with cancer patients. And they said to the patient, "What should the cells look like? Do you want them to be realistic, or not?" And they said, "Absolutely not. Make them as vicious and menacing as possible. This is our enemy. It's our mortal enemy, and we want to play that game that way." But that's a huge topic for discussion. I think it's very important. But yeah, and then there are ways to do nurturing in the body and not fighting. And then also a body game can also be a walking around in the world game where you're making health decisions. But then you can zoom in and see what's going on in the body as a result of what you've done, what foods you've eaten, or how much sun exposure you've had, or whatever. The nutrition game we made has a time shifter, so you can go and look at BMI over time based on the foods you've chosen to eat. And we got images of realistic BMI, so you get bigger or smaller depending on what you're doing. But you also have to control hunger and we have a nutrition meter and a hunger meter. So it's easy to make someone lose weight, but how do you keep the nutrition and the fullness? And that's part of the challenge of the game as well. And also, our health games, let me just show you the database really quick. It's available for anybody to look at. We have hundreds of games, publications. They're all health games. We're now expanding into climate change games as well. But you can search by keyword. So, I don't know, I'll put in the word cancer and search and see what we get. So then we got 3 games, 5 publications, and so forth. So a resource for us all. Anybody else? Yes?
When I'm teaching games and the computer in general, there are 2 health issues that won't go away. And I was interested in the aspect of your presentation that had to do with preempting problems and diagnosis and things like this. And these 2 problems are addiction and repetitive strain injury. So I don't have an answer to addiction, but in terms of repetitive strain injury, I would be very interested in knowing if there was research in terms of analyzing how a person uses a computer and then detecting when that behavior changes as a way of saying, oh yes. So we have, antivirus protection that it pops up and says, oops, something's gone wrong.
Yes.
But we don't really have something that says, oh, you're using the mouse a little bit differently, it's time for a break, or, you're in the danger zone. You've got 3 weeks before something breaks. And I'm just wondering if there's been any, repetitive strain injury is this huge problem.
It is a huge problem.
I'm just wondering if this is something that you're interested in, or even if you're aware of anything that you could send my way.
I'll take a look. I'll look for it. I have not been aware of anything in that area. But it's easy to detect, with, there are facial detection software, so I would assume there might be ways to do that.
The idea is sort of coming through Asimov, who claimed that the way people typed would become their signature, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And what's neat is that the technology can do what you'd like it to do.
Yeah.
But no, I haven't heard anything like that. Some of the folks on campus here who are working with rehab and They're actually using cameras to see how people move their arm, stroke rehabilitation. They may have some ideas for you about the technology to use. And I'd be interested in helping with how to motivate people and get them engaged in the actual gaming aspect of it. Yes.
Well,
Are we
From a
taking too much time?
Why don't we save the,
We can talk
we've got more
offline.
people to come
Great.
get. But thank you.
Oh,